Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping right into the middle of what honestly feels like a gripping historical thriller. We're going to examine a massive pivotal shift in the Indian independence movement. We're talking about intense ideological battles, global military campaigns, and a profound psychological shift that literally shook an empire to its core. Our entire focus today, Subhas Chandra Bose and the Indian National Army, the INA. So let's just dive right in.
Give me blood and I shall give you freedom. Now, that wasn't just a political slogan, right? That was a visceral, full-on battle cry. With this single, powerful quote from our sources, Subhas Chandra Bose completely changed the stakes, and really the whole tone of the fight for Indian independence. The era of pure petitioning, well, that was suddenly clashing head-on with the demand for total physical sacrifice. And to really grasp how we got to this intense boiling point, we've got to look at exactly where the fracture began.
Section 1. The Tripuri Split, a crossroads in 1939. So, picture this. It's 1939, and the Indian National Congress Party is at this intense ideological crossroads. You basically have two very different philosophies colliding. On one side, there's Subhas Chandra Bose. He firmly believed in adopting assertive methods for the attainment of Swaraj, or self-rule, and he really wanted to unify the entire left wing under his party. On the flip side, you have Pattabi Sitaramaiah, representing the mainstream nonviolent struggle. And crucially, Sitaramaiah had the direct backing of Mahatma Gandhi. But here's the absolute twist. At the Tripuri Congress session that year, Bose actually won the re-election for Congress president. He actively defeated Gandhi's chosen candidate by a majority of votes.
Section 2. The Forward Bloc. Forging a new path. Because of these really deep, profound differences with Mahatma Gandhi and the Congress Working Committee, Bose didn't just stick around. He resigned his presidency in April 1939 and went on to build a brand new political engine from the ground up, the Forward Bloc. The main goal? The liberation of India, of course. But he wanted to achieve this specifically with the support of workers, peasants, youth, and other organizations. Politically speaking, the Forward Bloc was working toward the establishment of a socialist state. He was out there aggressively organizing the masses with a very clear, distinct ideological vision.
Section 3. Forging the INA, a global military shift. And this brilliantly illustrates how the political struggle inside India rapidly escalated into a military struggle out in Southeast Asia. Just consider the sheer speed of Bose's actions here. After resigning in April 1939, he travels across the globe, and by 1941, he arrives in Singapore to take charge. Fast forward to 1943, and he doesn't just have an army. He literally sets up the Provisional Government of Free India right there in Singapore. He moved incredibly fast to establish this rival government outside of British control. The source material actually gives us this dense chapter-at-a-glance summary, and it's wild how much massive global history is packed into just a few brief paragraphs. We're talking about everything from Bose passing the Indian Civil Service examination over in England, all the way to leading a massive army in Southeast Asia. It truly emphasizes just what an absolute whirlwind this historical period really was. Now, just a quick point of clarification about the Indian National Army, the INA. While Bose definitely became its most famous leader, the idea was actually initially conceived and formed over in Malaya by a man named Mohan Singh. Basically, the Japanese handed over Indian prisoners of war to Mohan Singh, who then inducted them into the INA. It was only a bit later that Bose actually took over as Supreme Commander, setting up INA headquarters in Yangon and Singapore to really push that military campaign forward.
Section 4. March to the Motherland. War is declared.
Under Bose's leadership as Supreme Commander, the INA officially declared war on Britain and the USA. I mean, think about how audacious that is. This was no longer just political resistance, it was a formalized, all-out military conflict. To really capture the urgency of this moment, listen to this excerpt from Bose's address in our source materials. Friends, 1 year ago, when I made certain demands of you, I told you that if you give me total mobilization, I would give you a second front. I have redeemed that pledge. Our victorious troops, fighting side by side with Nipanu's troops, have pushed back the enemy and are now fighting bravely on the sacred soil of our dear motherland. I had asked you for men, money, and materials. I have got them in generous measure. Now I demand more of you. I mean, wow, that is an astonishing rallying cry for total war. And the thing is, the INA actually secured real, tangible, hard-fought victories. When Japan handed over the Andaman Nicobar Islands, Bose renamed them Shahid and Swaraj. The INA gave a seriously tough fight to British forces up in the Assam Hills and successfully captured Ukhrul and Kohima. They even raised the tricolor flag on liberated Indian soil on March 19, 1944. These territorial acquisitions were no joke. They gave massive, real-world weight to the INA's famous battle cries that still echo today, Delhi Chalo and Jai Hind.
But, history so often hinges on totally uncontrollable variables. Despite these incredible, sweeping advances, we've got to ask the critical question here. Why did the INA's victories ultimately fall short?
While the reality on the ground shifted dramatically, according to our sources, the INA forces were agonizingly close. I'm talking just 3 kilometers from Imphal, but they had to withdraw. Why? First off, their allies, the Japanese forces, had to pull back from the Indo-Burma border because of their deep entanglement with the Americans in the Pacific Ocean. Second, the heavy rainy season set in, completely halting their momentum. And finally, the ultimate blow. Japan surrendered in the Second World War on August 15, 1945. That single event completely sealed the fate of the INA. The soldiers were disarmed, made prisoners of war, and Rangoon was recaptured by the British.
And, tragically, the collapse of the military campaign also brought a sudden end to its leader. Based on the source text, the official historical account is quite straightforward. Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose left Rangoon for Bangkok and then flew onward toward Tokyo. But while on his way, the official Japanese version states he received fatal injuries in a plane crash and passed away on August 18, 1945.
Section 5. The Final Legacy. Impact Beyond Defeat.
So yes, the military campaign ended in defeat, but the story was far from over. In fact, the most massive impact of the INA was actually yet to come. The heroism and sacrifices of these soldiers revealed something really profound to the Indian public. When the British government decided to put INA officers, specifically Shah Nawaz Khan, Gurdial Singh Dhillon, and Prem Sehgal, on trial at the Red Fort in Delhi, it backfired spectacularly. The people absolutely welcomed these men as national heroes. Massive demonstrations swept the country, demanding their release. And it went even further. This actually inspired uprisings within the British armed forces themselves. In February 1946, Indian naval ratings rose in revolt in Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, and Karachi. These naval revolts quite literally shook the foundations of the British Empire. It forced a terrifying realization upon the British. They could no longer rely on Indian forces to maintain their rule in India. The public pressure was so immense, so overwhelming, that even though the court-martial held the INA prisoners guilty, the government had absolutely no choice but to set them free. And you can see this legacy reflected perfectly in the textbook exercises from our source material. They heavily focus on testing knowledge of Bose split from the Congress, the creation of the Forward Bloc, and the INA's war cries. It really emphasizes how crucial these specific officers, the events, and those exact slogans are to understanding modern history. They're foundational pillars, for sure. Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought to wrap up this explainer. Think about it. The INA had to retreat from Imphal. They were completely disarmed. Japan surrendered. Militarily speaking, the campaign was undeniably lost. Yet the story of their fight completely unified the Indian public. It inspired armed naval mutinies, and it fundamentally broke the British Empire's confidence in its military grip over India. So what does this all mean? Did the INA fail on the battlefield, only to ultimately win the psychological war for independence? It's a fascinating historical paradox to ponder, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep asking those big questions.